For years, Bloober Team was a familiar name in horror games, though rarely at the very center of the conversation. After Layers of Fear in 2016, they established themselves as a recognizable force in psychological horror, known for atmosphere, visual identity, and a distinct design philosophy. Some players praised their immersive storytelling. Others questioned the depth of their mechanics. That reputation, stylistic, focused, sometimes debated, followed them for years. And then, in 2022, something shifted. Konami announced that Bloober Team would remake Silent Hill 2, one of the most revered horror games ever created. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about their atmosphere or design priorities. It was about trust and legacy, about whether a studio known for a psychological horror could carry one of the most sacred names in the genre. And that raises a question worth pausing on. How did a studio that built its name on atmospheric horror evolve into the developer entrusted with Silent Hill 2? To answer that, we have to rewind. Bloober Team was officially founded in 2008 in Krakow, Poland, by Piotr Babieno, who remains the company's CEO. But the studio didn't emerge out of nowhere. Before founding Bloober Team, Piotr Babieno was involved in the Polish development scene during a transitional period for the industry. In the mid-2000s, Poland's game market was still stabilizing. Like many Eastern European studios of the time, Bloober didn't start with large console projects or a defined genre focus. They focused on mobile games, casual and experimental titles, contract development work. One of their early titles was Music Master Chopin in 2010, a rhythm-based mobile game built around the music of Frédéric Chopin. Player tapped along to classical compositions, combining educational elements with accessible gameplay. Another early project, Hospital Havoc 2009, was a time management game for mobile platforms. Players run a chaotic hospital, managing patients, resources, and efficiency under pressure. It was light, fast-paced and mechanically simple, and very far from psychological horror. They also released A-Man in 2011, a puzzle platform strategy game inspired by classic titles like Lemmings. Players guided small commander-like characters through hazardous environments, solving spatial challenges rather than experiencing narrative-driven tension. Bloober experimented with rhythm mechanics, time management systems, puzzle design, small-scale survival scenarios. They would test in genres, platforms, and production workflows without a defined creative identity. They were practical steps toward technical stability and financial sustainability. At the stage, Bloober was a small team, fewer than 20 developers, focused on building experience, refining pipelines, and establishing a foundation that would later allow them to specialize. The real shift began around 2014, when Bloober deliberately moved toward psychological horror. Instead of building complex gameplay systems, the team asked a different question: what if a horror came from perception itself? That idea became Layers of Fear. The game follows a tormented painter trying to finish his masterpiece inside a constantly shifting Victorian mansion. Hallways loop, rooms rearrange themselves, painting distort, and the environment changes when you are not looking at it. Built in Unreal Engine, the game relied on reactive environments. It was a focused, tightly scoped project developed over roughly 2 years, during a period when the studio was growing beyond its early small team structure. What truly set Layers of Fear apart was psychological pressure. The mansion reflected the protagonist's fractured mind. Every distorted painting, every warped corridor, every impossible architectural shift mirrored the mental collapse of the painter at the center of the story. And beneath the horror, there was a tragedy. Layers of Fear became Bloober's breakthrough. It sold over 2 million copies across platforms and gained major visibility through YouTube and Twitch, where its unpredictable environmental shifts worked especially well in streaming culture. The game also arrived at the right cultural moment. In the mid-2010s, audiences were drawn to first-person narrative-driven horror, especially experiences that worked well for streaming. More importantly, this game defined their identity, atmosphere, over mechanical complexity. From that moment on, Bloober Team wasn't experimenting anymore. They had found their niche. After Layers of Fear, Bloober Team didn't change direction. They doubled down on it, but with each project, the scale increased. Their next major step was Observer, a psychological cyberpunk horror set in dystopian Krakow in 2084. This time, the horror wasn't rooted in a haunted house, but in fractured identity. Players controlled a neural detective who could hack into people's memories. Unlike Layers of Fear, Observer leaned more heavily into world building. It featured a fully realized cyberpunk setting, voice acting by Rutger Hauer. It showed that Bloober could apply psychological horror to a completely different aesthetic. In 2019, Bloober took an existing franchise, Blair Witch. This was their first major licensed IP. The setting shifted to the Black Hills Forest, but the core philosophy remained the same: psychological instability over combat. Blair Witch introduced more traditional survival elements and the use of companion dog named Bullet. Actually, very cute dog. He helped track clues and react to unseen threats. Critically, it proved Bloober could handle an established horror brand. Released the same year, Layers of Fear 2 expanded the original concept. Players took on the role of an actor aboard a mysterious ocean liner. The themes shifted from artistic obsession to identity and performance. Bloober leaned further into symbolism, unreliable narration, and environmental storytelling. The biggest leap came with the Medium. This was Bloober's first true next-generation product. Its defining feature was dual reality gameplay. Players controlled a medium who existed simultaneously in the real world and the spirit world, both rendered at the same time on screen. This required SSD-based streaming and marked a technical milestone for the studio. The medium also brought back fixed camera angles, deliberately referencing classic survival horrors. By this point, the team had grown significantly, exceeding 100 developers. Budgets were larger, production values were higher, but the core remained consistent: atmosphere first, psychology first, combat still secondary. If Layers of Fear defined Bloober Team's identity, Silent Hill 2 defined their legitimacy. When Konami announced in 2022 that Bloober Team would remake Silent Hill 2, it was the most consequential moment in the studio's history. Silent Hill 2 isn't just another horror title. Released in 2001, it's widely considered one of the most important psychological horror games ever made, praised for its symbolism, emotional depth, and exploration of grief and guilt. There is, or maybe was, an important question. Why did Konami choose Bloober? By that point, Bloober had nearly a decade of experience in psychological horror, multiple shipped titles focused on trauma and mental collapse, proven they could handle licensed IP with Blair Witch, and grown into a 100-developer studio capable of larger productions. Bloober themselves confirmed that collaboration with Konami began years before the public announcement, meaning this wasn't a last-minute decision, but a long-term partnership. Original composer Akira Yamaoka returned for the remake, along with involvement from original art director Ito Masahiro. That signaled something crucial. This wasn't a complete reinterpretation, it was a supervised revival. Still, skepticism was immediate. Not because Bloober was inexperienced, but because Silent Hill 2 is sacred territory. Any change risked being seen as disrespect. There were also doubts about gameplay. Bloober had built a reputation around atmosphere-first design. Could they modernize combat without losing subtlety? That tension defined the pre-release conversation. And then the game launched. Players praised the visual fidelity and environmental detail, the respectful handling of James Sunderland's story, the decision to preserve the emotional pacing rather than turn it into action horror. Combat was expanded, but not exaggerated. Cinematic framing was modernized, but not sensationalized. The symbolism remained intact. For many players, Bloober proved something important. They understood restraint. And in doing so, they crossed a threshold. After that release, Bloober Team was no longer just a studio known for psychological horror. They were the studio trusted with one of horror's most protected legacies, and the one that delivered. After Silent Hill 2, the obvious question was simple: what does Bloober Team do next? Instead of doubling down on remakes, they turned to original IP with Cronos: The New Dawn. Cronos is positioned as a survival horror experience with a stronger systematic foundation, more player agency, more survival elements, more tangible threat. The setting blends science fiction and psychological horror. Early previews highlight a harsher, more hostile world, one that demands interaction rather than passive observation. Because for years Bloober was known for immersive environments and psychological storytelling, but often criticized for limited mechanical depth. With Cronos, they appeared to be addressing that directly. They were expanding their identity. People aren't talking about Bloober Team because they suddenly appeared. For years, Bloober specialized in psychological horror. They built a reputation around atmosphere, emotional trauma, and unstable perception. With Layers of Fear, they found their identity. With Observer and The Medium, they expanded it. With Blair Witch, they proved they could handle licensed IP. And then came Silent Hill 2. The ultimate test of trust, and they delivered it. That success reframed their entire history. What once looked like a niche specialization now looked like a preparation. People are talking about them because of growth. They improved step by step, project after project, until both players and the industry had to take them seriously. And honestly, that's a much more interesting story than a sudden fame. What do you think? Is Bloober shaping the future of psychological horror, or are they still proving themselves? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this video, hit like. And if you want to know more about gaming, subscribe to my channel. Stay awesome. Peace out.